Hello and welcome to another episode of All About Books. I'm Jay Taylor with Warren Berkeley, and we want to thank you for joining us. Warren and I enjoy talking about books. We enjoy talking with others about books. Warren, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Jay.
Who do we have with us today?
We have David Banning with us in this episode. And Jay, this is episode number...
Maybe 11.
Maybe 11. We have David Banning, who works with the Kleinwood Church of Christ in the Houston area. David has been preaching and writing for about 35 years. He has a whole series of Bible class workbooks for young people, and that series is called Get Them Talking. We may bring that up. And a book for parents, Raising Kids Who Have a Heart for God. David and I have been friends for, we think, 20, 25 years, and he is here in this episode to talk about not only these things that he's previously published, but a recently reprinted book, Do Things Well. David, thanks for accepting our invitation.
I'm happy to be with you guys.
Yeah, David, thanks for being with us. We like to start off by talking about just early reading habits. Tell us, what kind of reader were you?
Well, that's easy because it's the kind of reader I was and still am. I am a terrible reader. Maybe that's not what I'm supposed to say on a program about books, but it's just the truth about it. Reading is one of the hardest things I do, mainly because I'm just really, really slow. We had an intern a few years back, Matthew Bassford, that would take a book and read it in the morning. And I marveled at that. How does he do that? I just read really slowly, reread the same passages again and again. I think my brain just works too hard on a section. I have a hard time skimming. So I got to really work at that.
Well, in connection to your preaching, do you do any reading concerning preaching or outside of preaching? What books do you read?
Okay. Recently, I've been doing a lot of commentary reading because we do a text talk with our Bible reading. So I've been reading Carson and Bruce on Luke, which is where we're currently at in our Bible reading. And then I have being generous with myself. I have two other books open right now. I'll call it that instead of describing actually reading. I'm reading at them a bit. I'm working on Adler's book, How to Read a Book, hoping that's going to help me raise my skill level. And then the other one, the tough read for me right now, is Alter's book, The Art of the Biblical Narrative. Somebody was working from that recently and inspired me to go pick it up and take a look at it. So I've been working on that one recently.
David, we want to talk about this book, Do Things Well. And before we talk about the recent reprinting of the book, what can you tell us about the concept, the idea, your initial thoughts about the need for this?
Warren, it was based on bad experiences. Should I say that? That's honestly what inspired the book. Experiences that I had had and others had visiting different churches or going for gospel meetings and frankly, just encountering things that don't help us. Maybe the gentlest way to say that. I could illustrate that in some ways. I remember one Sunday night, my wife and I were driving in between services, going from one place on Sunday morning, trying to catch another place on Sunday night. And we rolled into this town and found the building where we were going to worship that night. It was about 30 minutes before services, and nobody was there. There was debris piled up around the front door of the building. And we weren't sure that anyone was meeting there. It kind of looked that run down, like you weren't sure there was still a congregation there. And then we waited and waited and waited. And just as we were about to leave, about 5 or 10 minutes before time, somebody rolled up and opened the doors. And one of the things I thought of in that situation is I imagine myself probably as a brother being generous with a group like that. I don't know that guests would always be so generous. In fact, sometimes I think outsiders that come in sort of like people who are looking to buy a house. They have a bit of a critical eye And sometimes we feed that with little things where we just need to do better. So lots of experiences like that motivated the different chapters that were in the book. And then I could say it opposite too. There were things I encountered. I was worshiping out in Kingsport, Tennessee when Philip Mullins was preaching there. And as the service started, this guy got up and read a few verses from Psalms about worship, and then commented about how we were here to honor the Lord. And then the song leader jumped up and led songs. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's how every service ought to begin. And so you'll see that Philip Mullins wrote the chapter in the book on the beginning service as well, because that really inspired me. And we came home and our guys bought into it. And so we adopted a very similar model where I was. So it was kind of those experiences that made me realize, and I don't think that it's the result of obstinance or people just saying, hey, we're going to do it our way. I think sometimes it's just folks don't know a better way. I had an elder who went through the book comment, I wish I'd known this 20 years ago. And that really registered with me that there are people I think would like to do better and just really aren't sure how to do better or what that looks like. And so we tried to collect a stable of writers who would have some expertise in these different areas and maybe offer some helpful suggestions and in different facets of our work together as churches where we could do better.
I think when we were having some initial conversations about publishing this, I may have mentioned an experience Paul and I had. We were traveling one time with Bill and Gloria Collette. I think a lot of people knew Bill Collette. He was in the Houston area for a long time. And we were traveling together, and it was a Sunday evening, and we came to a place I will not identify. And it was time to start, and we had a very similar experience. About just the last 4 or 5 minutes, everybody showed up, and it had the whole feel of something just casual. And sure enough, the song leader got up to start the service, and here's what he said. He said, all right, let's get this over with. And I looked over at Bill, and Bill looked at me, and I think the people behind us knew that we did not believe that was the best way to begin a worship service to the Lord. And so some of my experiences, and probably Jay could give some accounts as well. So do things well, very simple title. Now, David, tell us about the use of this book. Some books are read-through books. You buy the book and you read through it. Some books are for classes, some for individual. Is this for just men who lead? Tell us about the use of this book.
Well, oddly enough, Warren, I've had folks use it in all of those ways. Some preachers have just picked it up and use it to find ways to help the groups that they're working with. I know that some men's classes have gone through it as maybe sort of training class material, and a lot of the lessons I think fit that setting very well. But the truth is, some of the lessons actually are for the entire congregation and ought not to be limited. For example, one of the chapters that was written by Harold Comer talked about greeting visitors well. And boy, you talk about stories. Everybody has a story on some kind of bad visitor experience with a church family. And I think all of us need to be plugged into that and concerned about that. So I actually think there's a place to teach it to the entire congregation. I know some folks have done that. They've just had one large adult class and everybody's gone through it together. And actually, whether you're a song leader or not, the section on leading singing has some things where input from the worshipers sitting in the crowd could certainly be useful for men to hear. Song leaders need to hear some things in there about how they do things and who leads and things like that, but also the response of members to that is important as well, and how the way singing is done impacts them too. You
mentioned using this book in a class setting. David, let's talk about why we decided to go for the coil binding. Talk a little bit about why we thought that was a good idea.
Well, the other kind of binding, and Warren, it escapes me what that's called.
Perfect binding.
Perfect binding. Thank you. It doesn't fold open very easily. And the idea was for this to really be a workbook, and really in the bigger picture, the material is designed to be something for churches to work together on, to do things better. And so folding it open just seemed to be a much better way to go. I really like the new binding style. I think it makes the book a whole lot more usable, able to sort of take notes and jot things down. And while I'm saying that, in the bigger picture, that's really what a church family needs to do. There are going to be suggestions made in the chapter, but everybody will need to sort of fine tune the methodology for their group. I don't know that anyone's trying to advocate one right approach to everything, as much as let's find the best approach for our group. And so I think even the style of the book lends to this idea we're going to work on this thing together.
And you know, if people do not remember the details in some of these chapters, what this all leads to, the big takeaway is doing things with excellence. And I think Dee captured that so well in the last chapter, and Max leads off with that very well in chapter 1. So if people do not remember the details, if they get that, we believe good has been done.
Well, I will tell you, Max is the guy who inspired me on this idea of excellence. That was something he preached and preached at the church where he's labored for over 40 years now. And I think it's really an idea churches need to embrace. And that's really the backbone of the book. That's what it's about. Whatever we do for the Lord, he deserves our very best. And so let's figure out what is the best way to do things so we can bring him honor and lift up his people and reach folks who are lost around us.
Very good. Let me pause here and give some ordering information. The best deal you can get on this book is from the publisher, Spirit Building, $8.99. That's really where we'd like for you to order these. Matt Allen was very good to go with the idea of the coil binding, $8.99 at Spirit Building. Now, you can also get it from Amazon, and you can even get it from Barnes & Noble. The only reason I bring that up is you might be rummaging around somewhere and find an old Amazon gift card or maybe a Barnes & Noble gift card. And what am I going to do with this? Well, you can buy this book. It's not going to be on the shelf at Barnes & Noble, but it's on their website. But the best deal you can get is $8.99 at Spirit Building. Now we've got a little lightning round. We throw in here kind of as a segue to go to some other things we're going to talk about. And these are 3 questions for very quick answers. David, who makes the best chili ever?
My wife first and Sister Berkeley second. I'm looking forward to that. I missed that in January.
You sure did. David was scheduled to be here in January, and we're not having meetings, and so I owe him. Paula owes him. The last time David was here, and this relates partially to the next question, David drove all the way from here back home. I think were you in Alabama then?
No. I was still in Texas then, but it was you remember what happened with that meeting was we scheduled it, and then we wound up having an event for my senior son on that Friday night. So we had to drive late into the night to do that event and then get down to where you guys were. So it was quite a drive.
Yes, and I think you went home with a thermos of that chili.
Yep.
Now you've got to like chili to drive down the highway and have a thermos of that chili. And so Sister Banning and Sister Berkeley really know what to do about chili. All right, David, this is kind of what people know. One of the things people know about you, flying or driving?
Always driving. You miss too much when you get up in the air.
When you're not working, what do you enjoy doing?
I have recently picked up one of my dad's passion. I've started piddling with some woodworking in the garage. In fact, one of my favorite projects is me and some of the other shepherds have built tables and benches for some young families. You know, trying to start out, furniture is kind of expensive, and so we'd have a work day on a Saturday and get some of the young guys up and keep an eye on them when they're holding the power tools. And we've built some furniture items. I've really enjoyed that. So that's been something my dad has always done, and I'm kind of picking it up now that my kids are grown.
Good. Jay?
Well, David, one of the things you're known for is you just have a heart for young people, and you have these series of workbooks. Get Them Talking. Talk to us about that.
Well, Get Them Talking, Jay, is 20 years old ish. We published them over about 4 or 5 years. And I went back and added up today. It's about 20 years. And we started that project largely because there wasn't a lot of writing at that time for teenagers. There'd been some really good work that had been done in a previous generation, but as far as just sort of current up-to-date material, there hadn't been a lot of that done. And so we were trying to do some stuff in-house and then share that stuff, and it got really, really complicated. And it was just easier actually to just go ahead and print it and publish it for folks to use. And we've just been really excited that folks have found that useful. But I got to tell you, at 20 years, you know what that means.
Yeah, time to update.
Well, one of my workbooks references a VCR, and one of the teachers came out of class and said the kids didn't know what that was. And I just felt so terribly old after that moment. But yeah, update and listen, there's a lot of great stuff being written today. There's a lot more of that going on. And I think the great challenge, guys, is going to be to figure out what material looks like in the next 20 years, because so many things, I'm guessing y'all won't be a fan of this, but so many things are going digital rather than printed. And so what does Bible class literature look like in another 20 years? And I think that'll be an interesting conversation to have.
Well, we appreciate all the work you've done with those workbooks, just used widely. We like to end our discussion by talking about daily Bible reading. That's something that we want to stress to everybody, not only to see the value of daily Bible reading, but to do it. So tell us something about daily Bible reading. What do you do? What do you promote?
Huge fan of daily reading, especially when the whole church family is doing it together. I think that's a good habit building and a way of bringing folks together and generating a spiritual conversation. I am a big fan of the immersion read, where instead of saying we're going to try to read the whole Bible this year or the whole New Testament this year, basically we take about a chapter a week. This year we're reading through Luke and Acts, which by the way works out perfectly. You wind up with a chapter a week for the whole year. And it really gives people time to slow down and really drink in the reading. If they got a question, to do a little more work, or maybe shoot us a text with a question in it, and read it several times. And so I just feel like there's more retention when it's an immersion read. So I'm a huge fan of that. Not take away from what anybody else does, but I think that's a great way to do daily reading. I wish every church would have a plan for their church family every year. I think it's a great plan.
Good. Warren?
Thanks, David. We so much appreciate you being with us. We know you have a pretty heavy workload. Your interest in Christians doing better is really commendable. And we know of many uses of this book, Do Things Well, around the country. And we wish you and Heidi continued peace and energy that you apply to the Lord's work. And Jay and I will see what other books and author readers we can find to keep our interests moving in good directions all about books. Thanks, guys.